Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for everyone's attendance. We'll officially open the meeting, and I guess the first order is to grant permission to Westwood Media Center. Is anyone else planning to record or anything? Please identify so. If not, we'll just grant Westwood Media Center. All right. I did want to have some opening comments on a couple of fronts, just so for our working group as well as for the community at large. With regard to, for everybody, there's been quite a few emails. I appreciate all the feedback I'm receiving, and I mean that seriously. I did check with town council because I'm concerned about that we do things right. And we are an official working group, and therefore we come under the rules under the open meeting law. So our working group is made up of 9 official members, and therefore more than 4 is a quorum. I would caution us, we don't want to get close to a quorum, let alone over a quorum, to have deliberations. So for those people asking me why I haven't written emails to the group, it's because my understanding is that we can inform people, but we can't get into dialogue outside of a meeting like this. So I wanted to explain that and also explain to our working group that we are under the open meeting laws, and we need to make sure we all respect that. Also, I would like to share what I would have written, if I could, to open the meeting. As I've told several people I would do, because I do want to set the tone of how we go forward. But just to be clear, our first meeting was an organizational meeting. We were all learning out who we are. And for the record, I didn't know until about a day before the meeting that I was going to be co-chair, so I wasn't prepared to do much that evening as well. The second meeting, which many of you were at, was to get a little history lesson. I'm not sure it was as effective as I wanted, and I'll take the responsibility. I didn't do a good enough job setting that meeting up. Tonight and going forward, we're rolling up our sleeves, and we're going to start doing the work that we were assigned to do. I want to be very clear what our assignment is, so we're all working on the same thing. The working group was created to take a look at the 25% plan that clearly did not get widespread support at the hearing at the Downey School, to see how we could what recommendations we would come forth with to modify, improve the plan, to take that plan forward. I think also, just to be very open, that's a whole range of things we're going to take. I think we need to take that mission very seriously. That's what we were given as a mission. That's what we accepted when we accepted to be on this working group. But that being said, we're also Canton Street residents, Westwood residents, et cetera, and we also want to look at beyond that. If we could even make it better so we can get a better plan and figure out how to fund it, what would that look like as well? With regard to the email, and if you'll bear with me, I do want to take a minute to read what I would have written, what I did write, and then found out I can't send it. Just to answer several questions, and I would just rather do it this way and get it out of the way. So bear with me. It's not a real long email, but it'll stop me from jabbering. So I started by saying I'm writing about the Canton Street Project and the Canton Street Project Working Group. I'm writing as a Canton Street resident, and I'm co-chairman of the Canton Street Project Working Group. As I do not know several of the people in this email group, I would like to briefly introduce myself. My wife and I moved to our house on Canton Street in 1988, and we have been active and proud residents ever since. We raised our 2 children here. I served on several boards and committees throughout my 30-plus years in town. All that being said, first and foremost, I'm most proud of meeting so many neighbors and fellow residents. I received several calls from fellow Canton Street area residents leading up to the meeting at the Downey School. I had not been following the project until those calls. I really appreciate the efforts of Shelley Reaver, Gary Yuselian, Maureen White, and others. Their efforts brought awareness and process that otherwise may not have occurred. This effort resulted in more people attending the Canton Street hearing than attended most town meetings. The message from residents was clear: the 25% plan was not acceptable. Following that meeting or hearing, many things have happened. First, the select board listened to so many of us who asked to pause the process and create a working group to review the options and to make recommendations to them. The town has also been in touch with the state to negotiate changes and to make them aware of our working group process. We've been researching the history of this project and reassessing the tools that are needed for the working group to do its job. The working group has held 2 meetings. The first was an organizational meeting, the second was to review history. And then I went into the answer the questions that I was most actively asked. Why is the project being proposed? The town has reviewed implementing Canton Street's safety improvements for many years, subject to having funding as part of an ongoing planning and in the process subject to having funding as part of ongoing planning and in response to residents who have continually expressed concerns about safety. And I'm making that comment in my 30-plus year history of hearing how can we make sidewalks happen predominantly turned into non-vehicular transportation modes, but safety was always at the forefront of what that discussion was. Second, is the Canton Street project a state project or a town project? The town initiated this project and it is under the control of the town. We are not under the auspices of the state. The funding request is their say, but this is our project, and only the town of Westwood determines what happens with this project. 3, is there a push to improve Canton Street to make way for affordable housing? Westwood has been at the forefront of addressing affordable housing, and we are not subject to an unfriendly 40B project. 40B is the term for an affordable housing project. As such, no project can be forced onto the town. A friendly 40B project would be subject to local permitting. I have checked with several town officials and employees. I am told there is no plan in the works. What authority does the working group have? The Canton Street Working Group is an advisory panel. We're not a granting authority. We were appointed by the Select Board to review the Canton Street project, including the 25% plan, and make recommendations on how to move forward. Was the working group created to promote the 25% plan? The answer is no. We are tasked with reviewing any and all options available, including the 25% plan. The result of our working group review might be a recommendation to improve the existing plan, maybe a recommendation to do nothing. I will tell you personally, my goal is that we come up with something that we go back with a very strong recommendation. One comment I've heard repeatedly is that people were supportive of the sidewalk project in the beginning of the process. My hope is, as we turn to the active job of the working group, that we have a collaborative process that focuses on finding recommendations with widespread support and that rebuilds trust. I ask that you give us a chance to see if we can achieve that with your support as well. I hope, and I'm saying that because that's what I feel. To be very candid, the comments I'm getting, and again, I appreciate all the phone calls. I didn't know so many people knew my phone number, and I'm honored that they do. But candidly, I'm hearing 2 things, and they both can be solved with a collaborative process, and that is, can we trust the working group? I mean, now that level is here. I want to, starting tonight, that everyone who watches what we do sees that we have the best interest of the town, the community. We are the community. And I've just been thrilled to get to know the people who I've gotten to know on this working group. We're a diverse group. I think everyone has their hearts in the right place, and I'm excited to be co-chairing that process. With that, tonight we are going to roll up our sleeves a little bit. What we have asked to do is to re-look at the street. I have asked John Rockwell to help us with slides. To be very clear, this is not John's presentation, this is our presentation. John's going to guide us through the steps with the idea of, we want to stop and look at what options can be there. If I can make a general comment, not to jump ahead, but just so everyone understands what I believe we're going to look at today. As I mentioned earlier, this street has been looked at many times in the 30-plus years I've been active. And one thing I learned from the very beginning, and Nora will nudge me if I'm wrong, now that I can see she's next to me. Canton Street is not a 1.9 mile street that's the same as you go down the 1.9 miles. And years ago, we determined that there were 3 or 4 distinct sections of Canton Street. Whether it's due to topography, trees, walls, fences, the street, if it was broken into sections, each section has its own characteristics. And what I would like to try to start with is looking at the street and identifying the characteristics as a starting point, so we don't look at this as a 1.9 mile project, but we look at it in sections that make sense for each section of the street. So that's a way of saying, I'm wanting us to start over and looking fresh, not looking at what's proposed, but looking what tools we have to make the neighborhood safe for non-vehicular transportation. Now, I'm going to stop there. I probably have talked too much, but just let me ask the working group, is there any, or before I do that, and the other comment, I would like us to get going. As we're going through the working session of this, I want the working group to feel free, make comments, give advice, throw in whatever. When we get to a good point, we will open up tonight to public comment and question. So just so you know, we will be doing that. And the last thing I forgot to mention, even though we said this is a 2-hour meeting, we hope to accomplish most of our agenda in the next hour-ish. So we would like to end around 7:30 at the latest if we can. Let me just ask my co-chair, is there anything you'd like to?
Nothing to add.
And she didn't know I was going to say everything I was going to say, so sorry, but did I steal anything you wanted to say, or?
Not at all.
Okay. Welcome. Any comments, general things to help get the meeting started?
I like the idea of not looking at Canton Street as a two-dimensional 2-mile stretch. I think it's a sound approach to look at it, and I don't know what the identified chunks are, but that feels like a good idea to me, so I think that's a good way to proceed from here.
Good. Other comments? Yes.
So we have to talk about reducing traffic volumes. That's what spurred this project on by the DOT. They know there are going to be 5,000 cars additional per day on Canton Street, so they want to create a boulevard to isolate pedestrians, traffic, and to get a free pass on making Canton Street an access road to the Rotary. So we need, as part of this process, to put design features at the intersection, hopefully you can accommodate us, at the intersection of University and Canton Street to keep the traffic coming off of Dedham Street and the exit ramps onto University Ave. There are different ways of doing that, short of cul-de-sac in Canton Street, which I'm sure won't be accepted, but that was even bantered about years ago. But we do need to look at reducing traffic volume.
So let me just make a couple of comments in response to that. And again, it's not Steve in the group. I want it to be collaborative, I really do. But I can't address anything about what the state wants to do. I have not heard that. in all my research, but that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about what we can do. First of all, if we can improve the non-vehicular safety mission that this is, by definition, we're probably going to slow down traffic because the features we're going to put in are going to have a result of slowing down traffic. I personally, and I'll say it publicly, although I have mentioned this to Marianne privately, I believe that regardless of what we do with this project, I would encourage the select board, I'll now say it publicly, to allow this group or another group to stay engaged with the further assignment of solely dealing with traffic calming past this project. Because no matter what we do, I think the right thing is we've got to keep traffic counts going. We have to see a real change in volume, and then we have to get proactive on what we do, and that's not going to happen in the next 2 months. It's a much longer project. So I'm agreeing with you that this project, I believe, if there is a project that can go forward, will be a major part of slowing down traffic by the redesign, but then we should have a further assignment of studying what we can do to.
I disagree. I think we should negotiate with the DOT that we want traffic volume reduced. What can they do to help us? And we'll consider the traffic, the safety along Canton Street independently, but we should not give them a free pass. No.
Then let's see how we go forward through the process and how we find out how we
Everything is
can do it.
negotiable.
Yep.
Everything's negotiable. They want this, and we need to get as much as we want for our neighborhoods and for the town, not create a boulevard.
Okay. Other comments before we get started? All right. So John, are you able to start at one end of the street and
Yeah, so yeah, having set the table
help
there.
us see the different characteristics?
So we took a first pass at looking at what segments seemed to make sense. As Steve mentioned, some of the considerations were topography adjacent to the roadway, stone walls adjacent to the roadway, fences. You know, is there certain segments here that maybe don't have as dense a residential immediately adjacent? For example, section 1, East Street Rotary to down East Street. That segment, really no houses in that first segment, relatively steep downward slopes off the edges of the roadway. Then looking at section 2, identified from down East Street to Adams Street, beginning to pick up those stone walls on both sides of the roadway in general. Section 3, Adams Street to Hedgerow Lane, somewhat similar to Downey, becomes a little more densely residential. And then moving on to section 4, Hedgerow Land to Oceana Way, that's when the topography becomes obviously very steep. Uphill on one side of the roadway, downhill on the other side of the roadway, becomes much more challenging from a topography standpoint to introduce a bicycle or pedestrian facility on really either side of the road there without some grading impacts. And then the 5th section, I think Steve, you had mentioned potentially 3 or 4 sections, not really probably considering just the relatively short tail end sections, East Street Rotary to Downey, and then section 5, Oceana Way to University Ave, where you're no longer in the residential section there, more commercial, industrial properties adjacent to the roadway, heading down the hill toward University Ave. So I thought what would be helpful is if we actually jump out of the presentation and
Why would we do anything between the Rotary and Downey Street? Like, the Rotary is the most dangerous NASCAR track in the state. It's 2 lanes. It's probably the highest point of accidents. Everyone's getting rear-ended at that Rotary. So why would we even want pedestrians down at the Rotary?
it's because there are existing facilities, there is existing pedestrian infrastructure at the Rotary now, so we provide that connectivity,
it's a
so you don't
death-
leave a gap in the network.
It's a death trap. It's a literal, I don't know if you've ever been down there, but
Yeah.
it's a death
Can you
trap.
increase the volume?
I think he is doing it as we speak.
All right, continue.
Thanks.
My point is, so there's really, we're looking at it from a neighborhood perspective. There's no destination to go to the Rotary for the neighbors. So I can't imagine anyone wanting to walk to the Rotary.
Okay, comment noted. We can certainly, the working group has the ability to decide,
Downey Street,
we don't want this
yes.
project to
Downey
connect to
Street,
the
yes.
Rotary.
Rotary, no.
Gary, you're thinking to get to Islington, you would go Downey to, what is it, Smith?
Yeah, go to Downey. Yeah,
Smith
Downey to Smith.
Versus
It's all-
going to the Rotary and
Yeah, the
cutting
Rotary-
over to East Street and,
Safer.
yeah, I agree with that particular piece, although I do see people running down around the Rotary when I'm driving through there.
I hope they have a good life insurance.
So these images are based upon the 25% plan, just for context, but we can zoom in and then step through each of the segments, and certainly would like to hear feedback from the working group. Any comments we can mark right on the plan as we go along. I think what would be helpful is to consider, as we look at the constraints in each segment, which side of the roadway would seem to make the most sense. Group.
Sorry, Jonathan, I have a question before
yeah.
you keep going. I don't see like features that I would be interested in as we talk, like walls and trees and whatnot. Is there a version, or is that, if we zoom in, can we see that, or is
Yeah,
there?
if we zoom
Okay,
in.
it's-
So what we did, knowing one of the kind of critical considerations, let me try to find it here. So here's an example. We colored the existing stone walls,
Okay.
this light pink, red shade, so that you can more clearly see where those constraints are, recognizing that that was sort of a critical element along the roadway in most people's minds.
Is that everybody's stone wall?
Yeah, everywhere there was a
Everyone?
stone wall
It's
within the
pink.
survey limits, it was shaded.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that, at least for me, that the context that I was interested, you know, when I'm looking at it, to really evaluate it, so
Right.
thank you.
So at the 25% design level, as you're aware, so we had proposed this shared use path along the easterly side of the roadway and the sidewalk along the westerly side of the roadway. So in this first segment, if there were to be a facility in this segment from the Rotary to Downey Street, what are people's thoughts on which side of the road would make the most sense?
I don't think it's required.
Well, before we do that, if we could take a look down the street, and, you know, what would be very helpful, I think, is, let's look at, within the right-of-way, where do we have walls? Where do we have, I don't know if you can tell on here significant trees, I don't think you did any of that on this, but it'd be helpful to just know, before we look at, my preference would not be looking at what's on the plan, but looking at what could be on the plan. So it would be, first, let's start with a very basic thing. If we just go down each section, how much room is there to work with without destroying what's there? I think would be the first step of understanding what's there, because there may be a section that we could do anything we want, and then we're talking about aesthetics. And another section is very disruptive for people, and then we got to get, can it be done or not? So is that something you could help us?
Yep. From a
And does
topographic
everyone-
standpoint, it's a
does
little more
everyone
challenging on
agree?
a 2D plan.
Well, let me ask
but-
the group, is that a good approach? Is everyone
I
comfortable?
mean, Steve, I guess what my concern here is, and John, with all due respect, is I'm looking at the same plan that I looked at previously. And we could talk about options and shared paths and what have you. But getting back to the original premise of what Steve, I think, started out to look at, I would have stripped out everything. I would have simply left the road, the trees, the walls. And then, to Steve's point, see what's available in terms of space, but understanding that nothing's been decided yet whether we're even going to do anything with that space, okay? If I was a layperson looking from the audience back at this drawing here, I would be completely baffled as to what we're talking about. I would be completely baffled. It's really not clear, it's not graphically clear to me as a designer, by the way, what we're talking about in terms of coming into the Rotary, East Street Rotary, to the extent that we've got some safety concerns there that Gary has articulated. I think this drawing really needs to go back to the drawing board, and we need to strip out probably 80% of everything that we're showing today.
Yeah, it looks like he's doing that right now.
That's what he's doing now.
And I guess I'd just like to add the caveat, I appreciate everything you just said, but for me to really evaluate viability, it's hard for me, from my perspective and my background, to do that with a two-dimensional plan. If we're talking about things like topography and trees, and a satellite photo might be more helpful for me, or a site visit, which I think I'd mentioned before, because if there are areas that are very flat with certain features and other areas that have a very sheer drop, for me to really properly evaluate what I think is viable, I need a little bit more of that before I can give you good feedback on what I think would work and what wouldn't.
We can go with either option. I mean, we can look at street view, we can go to street level, we could look at the aerial, whatever the working group feels is the most efficient way to evaluate each segment of the roadway, offer some feedback, offer some commentary on,
Why
Like
don't
a
we do the
visual
satellite?
down
I think the satellite has a visual that people that are not used to engineering drawings can have a little more appreciation for. Would that work for you possibly, or we go back and forth?
The problem with these satellites is the trees are
Obstructing
probably
the road.
Well,
obstructing
they
what
took a
we
few
really want to
down.
see.
yeah, the trees do definitely.
Yeah, but I think it
So-
just gives you, I think it gives you just a,
This drone imagery is an option.
all right, well,
Pardon?
well, why don't we go between the two, between the satellite and the he took
I
out,
recommend drone imagery.
he took out the features
Yeah.
on the drawing, he was able to click them off, and then we can, he almost, it's like a blank slate right now, right, Jonathan?
Yep.
It's much better.
Good.
Like, can you,
Well, are the walls and things like that still in there?
Existing walls, yes.
Yes.
Maybe
Okay.
some walls and trees.
And is that the right of way or?
Yep, the right-of-way is the slightly darker line of
dash
here
line?
and here, yep.
That dash line's the right of way.
So the right-of-way is typically either 50 or 60 feet wide, depending on the segment of the
Yeah.
roadway we're talking
Why
about.
don't we, just so everyone's on the same page, because not everyone's a planner, so why don't we explain that there's the roadway, and there's a right-of-way beyond that, which is town land,
Yep. Yeah, in this case, along Canton Street, it's actually county-controlled still.
that's right?
But the county controls out to this,
10 feet.
what's called the layout or right-of-way line. And this distance between the edge of the existing pavement roadway and the right-of-way line is really reserved initially when they lay out a roadway for future
Side-
maintenance, future widening,
Sidewalk.
potentially sidewalk or other facilities in the future. Unknown, unanticipated reasons that they may need to expand the roadway or maintain guardrail, signs, utilities within the roadway corridor. And, as we've talked about at other public meetings, the perception when you own a home along a roadway is you become used to maintaining the road, your front yard up to the edge of the roadway. Some people understand that, hey, we don't own the last 15, 20 feet of this. Some people don't understand that when they buy the property. But the reality is, this wider 50 to 60 feet wide swath is what is controlled by, in this case, the county or the town.
Jonathan, can you educate us as to where the edge of the road is? There's a dotted line, the slash lines that are going through. They seem to,
Yeah, this is just the center line of the roadway,
well, wait a minute, it's cutting right through
and then
it's
these are the
moving.
edges of the roadway.
Yeah, okay, but that slash line is moving. As you go down Canton Street, it seems to be moving.
Well, it was the proposed alignment. It's not the
Right, well, that's
existing.
my problem. Where is the center of the road now
Hide that as
versus what the 25% plan suggested it was going to be? I think we're mixing oranges and apples here, okay? I really do. We're looking at what the remnants of the 25% plan as opposed to the raw data that where we are today on Canton Street.
We've hidden all but one line. I can hide the other, if you're patient for a moment. The center line of the existing roadway is this lighter double yellow stripe
Yep.
line.
Yep.
Okay?
Oh, dear.
Thank you.
And the dashes along the side are the right-of-way?
Yep, this,
And over on the other side, the same thing?
correct. No, they're not easements, it's the
right away.
layout line right of way.
It's right away. So, how many people do you want to hold your pencil while you add in the sidewalk while we watch?
And have we decided that from East Street to Downey Street, we don't need anything?
My comment was,
I understand that, yeah.
It's a personal opinion, but East Street to Downey Street is very much an ingress egress for cars and traffic. I see minimal pedestrian traffic there. If it can be accommodated, fine, but I wouldn't consider that a priority. Definitely between Downey Street, in my opinion, Downey Street up to, Hemlock is where the neighborhood areas are. Right, that's where people would want to travel between. The rotary just scared, I never tried not to go on the
And then
rotary.
the slopes going down.
Yeah. Oh, I know, there's topography issues.
Yeah.
You don't think people are gonna wanna go past Hemlock Road, like to the
Sorry?
University Plaza?
What?
Sorry?
You said up to Hemlock,
Past Hemlock Hedgerow, like
but
that.
down to University is what you're.
I don't know if you need it down towards University, because that's always, then you get into the Oceana, and it's a very steep hill, too. I mean, it's,
Have you seen the
But it'd be
drive-
nice to like walk.
you could walk, yeah,
Plaza.
but if, when we're looking at the shared use path at one time, looking at people's driveways, you couldn't accommodate the shared use path because of the slope of the driveway. The shared use path was 10 feet, then the angle of their ingress, they couldn't get down to the street. It was
Yeah.
an engineering problem for something that wide. If it's a sidewalk, that's a different story. Sidewalk could possibly be accommodated, but something that, 10 feet wide was difficult. I think it was even on Maureen's property,
They-
right? In
And
terms of the
Steve's,
steep
if I'm not
driveway.
mistaken.
And Steve's driveway, too.
Yeah.
So how do you want to proceed, Jonathan? Like, you want to, try to lay something in there?
Well, before we lay something in
We
there,
don't design on Adobe typically, so it's gonna be a little.
Wait, I thought you were just going to add it in there.
can you just, I don't know if this is possible, but make it just a little smaller so we can get closer to seeing sections to see if, looking at it this close, we can't get the feel for a stretch. And maybe we could, it's hard to see, I know, but maybe if we could just look at where we have restrictions first.
Yeah.
In this first segment, the restriction is the slope on this side of the roadway, and then, there's a vinyl fence that's on private property right in here. There's approximately 10 feet between the existing edge of roadway and that vinyl fence at the pinch point. On the other side of the roadway, there's
That's
no
private.
real.
That fence is on private property, not in the right of way.
Correct.
Oh, I thought,
It's-
that fence is on private property or?
It's just outside the right of way, so it's on private property.
So it's on
It's on private property.
It is on private property. Oh, okay. I misunderstood. So what could be accommodated in that section with the fence and the road? Like what? 4-foot sidewalk?
In a 10-foot segment, you could fit a standard size sidewalk.
Which
You could
is?
even put a standard sidewalk with a buffer, a landscaped
Okay.
buffer.
Okay.
A standard sidewalk would be 5 feet.
And then how much is the standard, what would you consider a decent, an appropriate buffer for Canton Street? Because I think you do need a buffer, personally. I mean, it would be great if you didn't have a buffer, but I've been on sidewalks without a buffer, and it can get a little dicey with a car going by at 40 miles an hour, right? So like a 2-foot buffer, or 1-foot buffer?
If you're seeking to landscape the buffer, the absolute minimum is typically 3 feet.
3 feet?
Try to get anything to grow in it without, along a roadside, it's a pretty
I think you just want.
inhospitable place for things to grow.
Okay, so,
Plug your computer into
Possibly. I can ask Charlotte.
I mean, I think no buffer would be a little dicey.
Well, the core would be from that. Just what we're talking about, just so everyone knows, is Nora has found a very good aerial view that the trees aren't blocking things. That seems to be able to go down the street. I'm just wondering if that might be something we ought to look at quickly.
We
Where is
can-
that?
I have it on Near Map,
Oh, okay.
which you don't have
Right.
access to, yeah. So, I don't know if we have another cord that's terrific.
Sorry, but This may give us a better view.
So
I
while
think
we're-
in tandem.
While we're looking at,
Or can
while
we
we're
do
looking
both?
at,
I don't
Because
know.
I think he's gonna.
Logistics.
I don't think.
so
we can.
Jonathan, would it be possible like, how complex would it be to see in the existing roadway, existing right-of-ways, existing property lines, what could fit, right? That would be almost like for lack of a better term, a minimally invasive design. Is that possible?
Without moving
Yeah,
anything?
I'm trying to.
What you're
What?
suggesting, without moving anything, any features?
Well, moving the minimum, like, you know, if you have to move a couple things, maybe okay, but I mean, you know, not like what we saw before, which
Right.
was, you know,
This is good.
Every segment is a little different.
Every segment's a little-
That's the
that's
issue.
fine.
Like, literally every house frontage is different.
yeah, I understand.
So it's a balancing act as we look at
But I
a
mean, if you
design
go-
down the
If
roadway
you,
length.
if you had the 5-foot sidewalk and it goes to 4 feet in some areas and back to 5 feet, you know, if it's a little bit meandering, that may not be bad. But I'm just saying, instead of starting with something this big where you have to take so much out, what could the existing boundary conditions accommodate? I'll leave it at that. And it could be anywhere from, I don't know, maybe it can be 6 foot, 4 foot, 2 foot, none, I don't know. Is it possible to look at it through that?
In a
to
general
those
sense,
conditions?
yes, it is.
What's the size of the the Downey Street sidewalk?
That was.
What's that width?
5.5 feet from face of curb to back of sidewalk.
On Downey Street. And
But
then
there's no buffer there.
Smith Drive, I was just going by Smith Drive. I mean, that probably has like a 2-foot buffer. I don't expect you to know that. We can measure it.
And another consideration is if there's a tighter constraint on one side of the roadway, depending on the magnitude of the project, there's flexibility to shift the entire roadway away from
Right.
one side toward the
Well-
other to provide a little extra space
Well, the other-
on the
the other
constrained
thing-
I
side.
would think
The other
that
thing I was
has to
gonna-
happen in certain sections, frankly.
Well, if you're gonna, if the project is gonna be such that they're gonna dig up the entire roadway, replace the water lines and sewer lines or whatever, then shifting the roadway can be done, right, within that. Not that anybody wants this massive disruption, but, I lost my train of thought. With respect to the road width, I think you said 11 feet is what you're recommending, you can go down to 10?
No, not
Possibly.
this. No.
From a traffic calming perspective, I think we would recommend going down to the minimum.
Which is 10?
10, yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Then that 10 could be, you know, that extra real estate could be given towards the buffer, et
Yes.
cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Let's
fine.
see if we can try one thing, and
Sure.
it may not, but unfortunately, we got this map, and you've got data on your screen that we don't see now. But maybe we could look at each section like Lenore has, and you can describe for us, based on what your dimensions are, how wide is the street here? What is on either side as far as walls, you know, point out, if you could, just so we can start to see, but move it forward so we can start looking what we have to work with. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, so let me just do it. Those people, this is a school vacation week, and there are some people not here because they're out of town, and that's why certain people aren't here. But everyone wanted to be here, so I forgot to mention it.
All right, so I can walk you down the street, starting at the Rotary.
Good.
Just point out on this view, the crosswalks and the existing sidewalks around the Rotary. There are Westwood residents who live on the other side of that Rotary and have access, pedestrian access, through the roadway, through the Rotary, and across those crosswalks and sidewalks, so you can
But it
see.
is only on one side of the Rotary, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So there's a full asphalt sidewalk.
You can't
You see-
get
can you see my
from East
cursor?
Street over, around, without, there's
You
no
can.
sidewalks.
No, there is. Here's a sidewalk. See this?
That is, but when you get to East Street, it stops, doesn't it?
No.
No, crosses
Okay.
here.
If you want to go on over to the train station.
It stops at the start of Canton Street, Steve. As soon as the
No,
Rotary
if you want to
ends.
go on to the Hilton, where
Okay.
is there a sidewalk now?
I think,
You have to go down towards the other end of the road, and then over,
right,
and then up to the hill.
right.
I mean,
So see, on this side,
But
on
even
this side, there's
even
no
on that
crosswalk.
Even on that side, there's, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, there's no crosswalk and there's no continuation of a pedestrian access. You've got it from that corner to Canton Street and that corner to Canton Street, but there's not a safe, and that's beyond our purview, but there is no safe way to go all the way around that rotary.
No,
As someone who's tried it, I can tell you.
no, so the only pedestrian access comes from here, down
Right.
East Street.
And that's where residents are, just for the record.
Correct.
Residents are off to the right there.
Right, and so they can continue down through this crosswalk, down the sidewalk, through another crosswalk, another existing sidewalk, all the way down to Canton Street. So I think whatever project is eventually evaluated here maintains that pedestrian access. May not need to have some on this side of the street. As you said, that doesn't go anywhere. We do have a crosswalk there,
That's
but
right.
there's no side, it's just a dead sidewalk.
No.
Right, if you follow it up that way, it goes to East Street.
Yes, but it doesn't cross over the rotary. It goes along the edge. So if you want to look here, you can see the sidewalk coming around this way and matches back up to that crosswalk.
Right. So now if we can start going down.
Sure. Just here going down to Downey and Metcalf.
So that fence is right there at the Morgan's property. That fence is on his property line, though, correct?
It's
Pretty much.
1 or 2 feet beyond the right-of-way line, but it's on
Okay.
his property. yeah.
But it's on his property line, okay.
Right, when you say 1 or 2 feet beyond, is it beyond, onto the right of way or
Property.
before the
On
right of way?
private
On
property.
private property.
On private, okay.
Okay.
And on the opposite side, is there, it looks like the street dip, I mean, once you get off the pavement, it goes down?
Yeah, the top of the slope is pretty much right behind the edge of pavement. There's a guardrail there now. And then there's a wetland at the bottom of the slope, right on that northwest corner of Downey and Canton Street.
So does that mean we're talking about, if we were looking at that side of the street, we're talking about the buffer, working in the buffer for the wetland?
We'd be working in the buffer, yeah.
Okay.
So that's that section of street. Now, you want to look at you want to look from Metcalf to Canton Terrace?
From Downey down to like maybe Adams eventually, I think.
This is this part of the road is, I think it's a little congested, you know, on the right-hand side there. But it does open up to a nice open area past Canton Terrace. There's I'll call it the grassy knoll, for lack of a better term, where I think there's access for the Verizon trucks and the cable trucks there. There's a large piece of property, yeah, right there at the start of, right there.
So the utility poles in this area are on the south side of the roadway, which is an obstruction to a side path or a sidewalk on that side.
Were you gonna
without
use,
having,
but you're
without
gonna,
moving them.
but those are gonna be possibly moved though, right? Up in that,
Yep.
up in this area? Right in here?
Depending on the scope of the project, yep, they would
Okay.
need to be moving.
But how much space is there? Like, is that a wider right-of-way than the regular street on that, on that section?
Yeah, the whole inside triangle, if you will, on,
Is it like 20
This
feet?
area is
Is it like,
all-
is it like 20 feet from the edge of the road to the right-of-way, or is it like
much wider than that. It's-
8 feet?
let's see, 45. I mean,
Oh my gosh,
it's
okay.
way out there.
It's
I mean,
underground vaults.
45. I mean, the nice thing is,
It's underground vaults
where I'm going with this is that up until that point,
on that triangle.
we hit Blue Hill Drive, and then there's access from Blue Hill Drive all the way to University, right? And we were able to cul-de-sac that, and it's very quiet, except for some people who may want to drive fast down there, but it's quiet.
The only other constraint of note is, there's a retaining, or a stone wall, sorry, just opposite.
Where the stone-
The intersection.
That's Blue Hill.
Yeah.
Where are you pointing out the stone wall? Sorry. So I can.
Right across from, was it Canton Terrace?
Right here.
Oh, there. But would you propose putting a sidewalk on which side of the street? On where the grassy area is,
More than
correct?
likely on the north side, yeah.
Yeah.
On the opposite side from the utility poles in
Right.
this segment.
Sorry, John, north is,
Well, it varies. Northeast,
Generally
right?
to the right
Yeah.
side of the
okay,
road.
okay.
once we get into this stretch, it's more east-west, I
Yeah.
guess.
Right.
Does the sidewalk need to always stay on the same side of the street? Can it meander between one side and the other?
It can.
Based on a crosswalk?
It can cross.
It can cross, okay.
I mean, over a,
Preferably at an intersection.
yeah, over a
obviously.
2-mile roadway, it could cross any number,
Okay.
a number of times and not
It doesn't need to
too
be on the
close to each
same
other.
side of the street continuously, okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we want to understand the impact.
And those crossings may give opportunity for traffic calming
Treatment,
measures as
right,
well. yeah.
okay.
I just make a comment that everything you said was the presumption that the sidewalk is totally positive, there's no negatives of the sidewalk. And there's actually 3 big negatives in the sidewalk. One of the things you're seeing, those people in the homes, wherever you put a sidewalk, those children will no longer be able to ride a bus to school. They're gonna have to walk the whole way. That's one point. Second point is you're gonna lose your scenic road status. And the third point is, contrary to what Mr. Rasky said, the state is gonna raise the 10% to 12%. These properties that you're going, putting the sidewalk in front of are gonna be eligible for multifamily development. So there's 3 negatives for putting sidewalk in any section of this scenic road and eliminating the status.
I really don't want to get into debate at this point, but with all due respect, there is walking, right now, I believe, anyone who lives over a certain distance, is it a mile, has bus transportation. Is that the way it were? And I don't know, we have the people here, but 2 miles?
And if you don't have a sidewalk, they have to also bus, I think.
But
I'm fine with that.
that's not,
Healthy living.
we're not at that decision point. Our task tonight is to look at what options we have. And let me just, I don't want to get into that, I want to try to keep us moving forward, but just for everyone's knowledge, I've already said I've had numerous phone calls. I will tell you, I have had as many people calling to say they're against this project as I've had people who say they don't want to speak up, but they're in favor of something. A very common thing I'm hearing, just so you understand what people are saying when they're not in an open meeting, is I've always supported or wanted to support a sidewalk. I'm hearing that the process didn't allow them to continue supporting. That's why in my email I made the comment, I hope we have a process that gets people back to looking at options. My goal is to have a very open process. Right now, we're looking at what could be. We'll then get to a point when we're making recommendations to say what other things we ought to consider. But the thing I'm hearing overwhelmingly is if we could start with the sidewalk and figure out the rest, I'd come back and try to support what we're doing. I just want a dialogue, and we will get into some public comments, but I'd like to get through the street. I'm going to try to keep that discipline just so we can try to accomplish what we need to in another 35 minutes. But we will stop at 20 after for public comment if we're not even close to getting done, regardless, okay? But we need to be sensitive to that. Our job is to look at what could be right now, nothing else.
So now coming from Canton Terrace towards Adams, right? We got to take a look at what you can fit in there.
And you can see the stone walls on both sides of the street.
Yes, once you get
What's
past
the-
Courier, there's
And
a
what is
segment
the-
with stone walls on both
What's the
sides of the street.
distance between the stone walls?
It's probably 10 feet, I'd say.
That's more than 10.
No, between the stone wall on one side and the stone wall on the other is what you're,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, no, it's, I'm talking between the edge of the street and the stone wall.
No, I'm asking, what's the space in
40.
between the stone walls?
45 feet to work with there,
A stone, wall to wall is 45 feet?
roughly.
Okay.
You're
I-
saying
I
there's
have a-
45 feet between those stone walls?
Well, yeah, probably.
In that one segment.
Yeah.
I mean, they vary quite a bit, every property there.
I'm sorry, quick question about this stretch, since I am seeing a lot of stone wall. Are the stone walls entirely within the right-of-way, or are there any of those stone walls that are currently on private property?
The vast majority of walls are within the right-of-way.
Okay.
Some of them are immediately on the right-of-way line, and, maybe a foot beyond it, so they're intended to be a boundary wall, I think.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's my house.
So, John, in this segment, which side has the most intrusion to residents, or,
I'm sorry?
I'm just asking John, like, I think for me and the way I learn, I just want to understand, like, we can see this, but like, in this segment, which side of the street has the most intrusions in terms of eating into residents' property is, I know that we haven't done a tree assessment yet, but,
Well, that section of the road on the right-hand side from where we're looking at has the most trees. They're mostly sugar maples.
Which address are we at here?
Some larger
roughly?
than others.
We're at Adams.
Okay.
That's Gary's house.
And there's probably, between the stone wall and my fence is probably 12, 13 feet. And then from the stone wall to the edge of the road is probably like 10 feet, I'd say.
Yeah,
Ballpark.
between stone walls on each side, 33 feet
Yeah, it can't be 45.
in this segment, yeah.
Okay.
10 plus 10.
But there's room available on that side of the street versus across the street.
So if your roadway's taking up 24 feet of that, two 10-foot lanes plus 2-foot shoulders, then you have 8 feet to work with on
So-
one side or the other in theory.
So you could
for-
fit something in there,
You could.
like a sidewalk.
okay, so in that, I'm just trying to follow, because John, I know you're looking at a different version of the map, but you're saying in this particular segment, the northeast, or what looks to me like the right side, would make the most sense in terms of a sidewalk due to less impact?
If you move the,
I think in this segment, to fit a facility on one side or the other, a slight shift in the roadway itself would be needed.
which wouldn't be bad, because actually, a shift in the roadway was there years ago, and it was removed to allow cars to go through there. Years and years ago, there was a little jog in the road.
There's more available right-of-way on the
Right side.
east, on the right side here,
Right.
yes.
That house with the horseshoe driveway, that's the only house where the stone, that I believe on the street where the stone wall will not be affected. Along with the pool and the horseshoe driveway.
Now, a lot of people have put right in that area, right? The Strausses and my neighbors, the Jarejas and Shabas, they have decorative walls and gates, et cetera. Are those are those on their private property? Are those in the right of way? Would those be impacted? I mean, they have concern, and rightfully so.
Basically, any that are on the right side here
Yeah.
are within the right-of-way.
They're within the right of way, right? Okay.
Just from a constructability and cost standpoint, if any walls could be avoided, those that are most expensive to replace or reset, would probably make sense to try to avoid those.
Okay. Well, if you could see what, what could be accommodated in those sections.
Nora, where are you now? Is that Forbes?
That is, no, that is Cushing right there, I think. Oh, it's Forbes, okay. Okay.
This is a great map.
And the topography of this is all, I would say it's all relatively flat from there all the way towards Canton Terrace. You know, it's pretty, doesn't go, from Canton Terrace on down towards Downey, that's where it starts to go downhill.
Yes, I mean, just north of here, you're constrained by right-of-way, between the right-of-way on the left and the walls that are encroaching on the right. So
Right.
it's very tight between those two elements.
Nora, can you hold on one sec? Sorry. John, same thing here with the walls that we see by the right of the red car. Well, I guess there's two red cars in this visual, but on the northeast side, there are more walls there. That's also within the right of way.
Northeast, that curved.
Sorry,
You're
I
saying,
had
you're
like
saying
a
the
laser
curved wall
pointer.
at the entrance?
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
that's Perry, right there?
That's Terry, yeah.
Which curved wall are you looking at?
That one.
I can
Yeah,
go to
because I
this
think
one.
she's
One on
talking
each
about
side
what's
there.
up.
Not that one, this
No.
one right here.
This one up here?
Right
Talking about the one up
Oh,
to the
there.
left.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So we're still looking like the right or the northeast side makes the most, because again, we keep talking about like which side are we gonna do? Are we gonna jump from side to side? So the whole time we've been on this.
So
one
far, it
particular
looks like
side
so far it looks like the northeast side has the most open area, for lack of a better term, or at least disruptive, short of reconfiguring the road.
Right, right, okay.
Yeah, this is another spot where there's about 33 feet.
I think it's a good suggestion. If we could start referring to as the right side or the left side.
the right
The
side.
top side
That
or the
works for me.
bottom side.
Yeah.
If we are looking at in-between walls of 33 to 45 feet, there is room to move the road then,
There is
because the road is 20 feet.
24.
24 feet.
Yeah. So, yeah, so in the most constrained sections, if we only have 33, you only have 9 feet left.
Right.
And you can't have your road immediately up against a stone wall. You need an offset from it,
Right, right.
from a safety
This
perspective.
is just a question I have in terms of design implementation. Let's just assume it's a sidewalk of 4 or 5 feet or something along those lines with the buffer and the curbing, et cetera.
They can't hear you.
Oh, let's just assume it's a sidewalk design with some curbing and a buffer. My question is duration of the project. The DOT said like 3 building seasons, and I gotta be honest with you, I kind of cringed at that in terms of 3 building seasons. I mean, when the Dedham Westwood Water District, we rebuilt from the Rotary to Canton Terrace for new water lines. We did that in 6 weeks. So I was just thinking, is it really 3 seasons, or can this be done in like a year?
Well, they're planning for the entire construction contract, which is basically from notice to proceed to contractor to final inspections complete, closeout
Okay.
done. So there's a lot of kind of
Buffer.
slack time at the
Like-
beginning and the end in
Okay,
particular.
all right.
The active construction time, this is probably more like a
A year?
year and a half. at
Okay,
least.
all right.
I mean, it depends on the utilities. You got all the
Oh,
utilities.
the
Depending
utilities,
if we could scale
utilities.
back the utility
It's the utilities,
relocations, then
okay.
it would be faster, but.
Okay, I get it.
Between
I get it.
drainage, utilities.
Okay.
Full depth pavement, curb
All right.
setting.
I didn't mean to take you off track, but it was just something that's been in the back of my mind in terms of the duration of the project over those number of years.
If we formed a subgroup towards,
So Nora, before we go too far, John, so it's a good point about the utilities. Are we moving poles in this whole scenario?
Not yet.
I think the poles are all.
From where we just
Under
started?
many scenarios, yes.
Pardon me?
Under many design scenarios, we would need to
No,
move
I
poles.
understand
But
that,
under
if
this
if it was yeah, but where we were just talking about the right side of the roadway and entertaining a 5-foot sidewalk, have we moved any of the poles?
Yes.
We have.
Most of the poles that would, from the rotary down to here are on that right side.
How much, like, do they really have to move a lot, or is like, I see some stakes that are like, not even a foot, or some are like 4 feet, they vary. I mean, that was for the older design, but do you think that when you do the layout for whatever sidewalk, do you think that we would be able to, we'd have to move all those poles still?
It depends on whether you have a bike facility, a shared facility, or a pedestrian only facility.
Let's suppose we just stay with a sidewalk, John, for the time being.
If it's just pedestrians, then the offset isn't as much of a concern. If you have cyclists, then you need to be concerned about a safe offset from
Right.
that facility.
Right. Gary, to your point, where are the water lines in the street?
Oh, I apologize, I didn't get it, look, the water lines below the sewer lines, but they're not, I can get the geography of where they are, with respect to the center of the road. I was remiss in getting that. I can get that from Steve Locke at the district.
Some are on the road, some are on the properties, the house sides of the stone wall.
So the lines are cast iron. They were put in 1935. They're due to be replaced in 2035. They have a 100-year economic life. Gay Street was put in 1930. They're due in 2030, right? So Fox Hill is 2040, I think. So there's Hartford Street's the same way. So, but I have the schedule. So Canton Street is not the first one, but it's 10 years out is when they'd want to look at the lines.
And so from a financial
Unless-
perspective,
2035.
Unless the street gets torn up, and then they'll do it sooner, probably.
Or can they not afford
well,
it?
can we afford to do that?
Right. Yeah,
Is
can
is
they
there
afford
money
to
in
do
the budget to do that?
Well, my point is on the water lines, it's not like they're, we're 20 years beyond the economic life and, they're about to
Right.
blow up. We have 10 years economic life left in the existing lines on Canton Street. So it's probably time to take a look at them. By the time we get if a project gets approved, we're probably 3-4 years out, 4 years from there, so, it's
Right.
close enough.
Gary, isn't there a large DCR water main buried way into
It's all 8 inches, Steve. It's all 8 inches.
really?
Up until the rotary, then I think it goes 12 inches across the rotary to tie into along East Street that they put in. But along Canton Street, it's all an 8-inch main. And I asked the engineering department, would they keep it the same capacity? They said yes. They wouldn't increase the capacity beyond 8 inches. They said it's plenty of water.
But there's not a separate water main from DCR, not DCR, MWRA. The MWRA was the main.
I don't think along Canton, I'll check. I don't,
It broke one time at 128 where it crosses.
yes, there it is. Yes, there it is on 128 where it crosses.
It actually goes down Canton Terrace and crosses
Yes.
under 128.
Yes.
So
Yes, there is one
that's
there.
there somewhere, but it's a,
But along Canton Street, it's an 8-inch main.
right. But I just want to,
There is that,
There is
there is a
another main
crossover,
there.
yes, under the highway.
I just want to point out that again, to emphasize that that's a separate project really as part of the Durham District Water District, has nothing to do with this project, though you want to time it.
We would time it.
Time it.
We would time, so typically the Western Water District, we try to replace 2 miles of pipe every year. There's 200 miles of pipe in the system. And if the town is going to pave a certain road, we would accelerate moving the water, doing the water mains where they're going to pave to coordinate, so we save on paving costs and efficiencies and not dig up the road. So we coordinate with the DPWs on when they're going to do it, and then they replace the lines.
I'm Steve Owen, 52 Glendale
Yeah,
Road.
but let's get back to,
All right, so anyway.
All right, so here we're down to Everett Street and White Lane.
And I think in this segment, it actually makes sense on the left
The other
side of the
side.
roadway. However, the utility poles are on that side. But from a potential impact to stone walls,
Could I,
The
pardon
left
me
side
for-
makes more sense.
Pardon me for interrupting, but I would say that from every, on the section that we looked at before is also probably the fastest part of the road. The speed limit's 35, but the cars are going over 40 there typically, right? So when we look at that, I would, if we could look at what type of traffic calming we could put in to reduce the speed, because that is the straightest part of the road too.
Do you know?
And then coming up, as cars are approaching from Oceana Way towards Everett Street, it's very fast right there too, at that intersection.
Yeah, so I will point out, for the speed limits, there are variations. So between East Street and Downey Terrace, it's posted at 30. It's all regulatory signs too. And then between Downey Terrace all the way down to University Ave, it's 35.
No, it's 30 it's 30 from the Weatherby House towards Canton Terrace. It goes down to 30 miles an hour.
This is not,
I've
posted.
seen
We're gonna
35.
solve this.
35, it's
After Downey Terrace.
35 going one way, 30 going the other.
Right.
It's two different speeds.
Yeah,
Yeah. So why don't we, just because of the time and I want us to be effective, maybe we need to turn to a little bit of a discussion. I'd like to, if we could turn to a little bit of a discussion and just pause here for a second. So I think what I'd like to ask the working group is, what are your ideas of how we can get us tools so that we can become more effective? What should we be doing to help us be active? And do we have enough sense from just looking at this as to, does anyone have any views as to, are there sections that makes, how could we define what sections of the street ought to be looked at as a section? Or, where should we divide the street into different sections? Because what it does show me, and I don't know if you agree, there are differences. So what we're hearing, there clearly are differences, and it seems like there's really three big sections, but what does everyone think?
Yes, I would agree.
So from the Rotary,
And you didn't do from Hedgerow down to Oceana.
Yeah, we didn't do
from
that yet.
Hedgerow all the way down to Oceana, I think is a section. Yeah, I don't think we
we
would
haven't-
subdivide that. And
I think between Downey and Hedgerow Hemlock, we were looking at one side of the road, but there are some sections you may want to flip, you may want to have a crossover to the other side of the road. I think there was an area there, so
Yeah, everyone.
within that area, it's not just a straight shot, you may have to cross over, which is acceptable from a design standpoint.
I think it's acceptable, and it might even be preferred from a traffic calming perspective as well.
Fine.
How do you cross Canton Street? I'm sorry, but how do you cross Canton Street where there's a sidewalk and make it safe? I don't understand how that would be safe.
Would be a totally different treatment. You would put in a crosswalk with calming measures to get traffic to stop if someone's in this crosswalk.
And other high visibility enhancements, lighting,
They do have those in.
flashing warning beacons potentially.
Right.
Are you going to look at, we're going to look at trying to fit in the sidewalk. Are you going to look at traffic calming treatments as well?
If that's what the
At some
working
point
group
in
wants
time,
us to
like,
look at.
when would we discuss that in the process? Like, after we try to,
If we decide that we want crosswalks, if we meander the sidewalk, or raised crosswalks an option, because I think that has some implicit traffic calming in it, because you have to slow down if you don't want to take your muffler off.
That must be done.
Yeah, we got to be
I mean, I think
careful
there's
that
a
because
couple
of
of
the
inherent questions we
volume.
need to answer before we are
Yeah,
deciding
I agree.
anything.
We're getting a little ahead.
Okay.
I think what we need to, but these are all valid things that we got to get to quickly. But we first have to be looking at what are we going to recommend to do with the street, with the non-vehicular traffic issues of the street.
One tidbit that would help me as far as evaluating impacts, and I know it's come up before, and I know we can't get an exact number of impacted trees, but a solid estimate, and I'm getting asked this question, and I have to keep saying, we don't have an estimate. I'm not looking for an exact number, but it would really be helpful to get some sort of decent range of number of trees impacted, and how many big trees, you know, how many are saplings, how many are more older growth trees. I would find that helpful, as I think many residents would.
I agree, but I think we have to, as a group, we have to decide, what is it that we're doing? What is it, what are we going to entertain here? Is it just a sidewalk? Is it a sidewalk and a path? I mean, what are the parameters of adding this, quote, safety to Canton Street? Which, by the way, I have some reservations about. I mean, I've been on Canton Street for 40-some-odd years, raised 3 children there and what have you. And I have to tell you, sidewalks or no sidewalks, I'd be hard-pressed to let, anybody under 14 years of age walk along any sidewalk at 45 miles an hour. First of all, I mean, one of the beauties about Canton Street is location. You have access in and out of Canton Street. You go to 95, you go to 128, what have you. We live in a world where there are some very odd situations that are occurring. I mean, we certainly saw that out in Missouri just this past week with people, bringing out arms and shooting each other just because there was an argument. We have all kinds of different people out there that have different interests in kiddos or what have you that might be walking or riding on the street and what have you. It doesn't take much time to slow down and grab a child and you're heading out to 128 or the Mass Pike or what have you. I mean, I have to look at this, and I've been thinking about it since you invited me to this committee. How many times would you really let a kid out on that sidewalk?
Never.
I think the answer is exactly as this woman iterated out there, never. I mean, we never let our children play near Canton Street. The dogs and the cats, they learn their lesson the hard way. But the children, they always played in the backyard or what have you. We kept them over in the conservation property, and if they needed to go, for a play date with another group of people, they typically weren't in the neighborhood. Susan drove them, and brought the bikes or what have you. They weren't allowed on Canton Street, to be perfectly honest with you. I really have a hard time putting a lot of faith in the fact that we're putting down a sidewalk, and frankly, a shared pathway is not my cup of tea either, but and expecting that to get actually utilized, Mary Ann. I don't see it. I just don't see it, and it is based on experience, raising children and families that we've seen and known on Canton Street for years.
I agree with you.
So, I'm not getting into a debate tonight. I just want to say that I'm hearing all sides. And one thing I've been hearing, you asked the question why. One thing I'm hearing, let me tell you 2 things I'm hearing. One thing I'm hearing is if there were sidewalks, I think we'd use them. I'm hearing things like, I have to get my kids in a car to go just 5 blocks away because there's not a safe way for them to walk. Or I don't even feel comfortable walking with my 3 kids. If I only had 1 kid, I might, but I have 3 kids. There's not enough room, and I don't feel safe doing that. So I don't want us, right now, I want to figure out how we go forward. But if you had I'm really getting educated by talking to people. And I don't have the answers, and I don't want to debate, but I do think that there's a sentiment out there that if we had a safe way to go, it would change the way I could live my life. I'm hearing that. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm telling you what I'm hearing.
Steve, I'm not getting into, I don't want to get into a debate either, but I think it's incumbent on this committee to decide at a very basic level, what is it that we're looking for? So, is it a sidewalk? Is it a shared path? What is it that we're trying to drive into the design?
So here's what I think we ought to look at doing with the hour, because I said I would stop now to open it to public. What I would think that would be helpful, and I just want to get reaction. When we talk about a sidewalk, that can mean a lot of different things. You know, sidewalks can be gray cement. They can be stamped to look like a brick pathway. There's a lot of things we can do aesthetically with the sidewalk. Same thing with any improvement we do. What I think we ought to look at is, what are all the options of anything we would consider? What are the options of a sidewalk? What are the options of a bike path? What are the options of a combined bike path and walkway? At least we could look at what aesthetic as well as engineering characteristics we ought to consider. I think we ought to look at the street to say if there were big sections where we don't have to touch the wall and move the street, what would that look like? Driving up and down the street, I've done that more in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last year, I think. To me, I think the only way this project gets done with the least amount of impact is moving the street in several places. I think that's something we ought to understand. To your direct question, what I'd like to do is look at all the options, and then when we see what it looks like, decide, does it make sense or not? We are charged with making recommendations to the 25% plan. I have very openly added to that and anything else we want to recommend. So we need to do what we were charged to do, but we're broadening it. But if we don't first look at the first charge, we can't broaden it to what else we want to recommend.
I totally agree. Where I'm having a problem is with the open meeting law that requires us not to have satellite groups of people
Well,
going off and doing
and
chunks of design.
And just so you know, Ed, to be very open, I just asked Mary Ann, is there any way we could split into subgroups so let people do it? And I think we're breaking the open meeting law.
I totally agree. I mean, I think, Mary Ann, this is the only way, look, you got a body of knowledge over there that has all the dimensions directly in his computer. You need a group of people over there to sit down with John and go through the various sections of the road, as we tried to do today with the help of Nora, and put together some thoughts about, all right, can we support a bike path here along with a sidewalk, yes or no, and come up with a series of ideas that we bring to the forum here, and we present to the forum a couple of different plans, up to and including doing nothing. It could be the plan. But I think, to your point, we owe it to the town, because we are an assembled group, we have been selected by the Board of Selectmen to do the job. I think we need to do it, but it's not going to happen here in this type of a forum.
We need more tools available to us to
Right.
get it done.
Right.
I'm going to talk to town council to see what we can do. We want to always involve the public. That's the problem we've got in something like that. But maybe we have a couple of smaller working groups and we invite the public whenever they're going to meet. I don't know. But we also have another problem, just to be very open about it, and that is the Westwood Media Center can't cover all the things we're doing. There's a very high probability our next meeting will be by Zoom, just because Westwood Media Center probably can't accommodate our schedule. So that's complicating things a little bit.
We can't meet here?
It's not meeting room, it's being video, it's the media center.
Oh, okay.
They are overburdened right now with the town meeting coming up and all the things they have going on. They just don't have the resources to cover more meetings than they've already got on their schedule.
You can't just like
Could we-
iPhone record it, the meeting?
Can what?
You can't just use an iPhone to record the meeting and upload it?
Conservation Commission meets in person, but I believe they record via Zoom, right? Westwood Media Center is not recording them, as I recall.
It's a difference between recording and participating.
I see, okay.
We don't have the ability to do an effective hybrid meeting, so that if we meet in person, we can't have people coming in over Zoom and participating in that meeting.
So question on design and iterations. Should we give Jonathan some guidelines to say, can something fit within these parameters for the next meeting? Do we wait? Do we need a budgetary like, how much that's gonna cost to do that? Or it's within the envelope that was authorized of the 100,000? What, can we make some incremental progress to see? What I'm recommending, I don't know, and what I've heard is, can we see what we can get with minimal impact to people's properties and stone walls? Just see what that is. If it's 5-foot sidewalk, a 4-foot sidewalk with 2-foot buffer, we move the roadway. Is there some sort of minimally invasive design we could look at? Is that feasible, or do we need more inputs in time?
I think.
Because I'm looking to start,
I
look at
appreciate
something
what
to
you're
start
saying,
at.
and I
Because
like where you're going, but I think what we wanted to have happen, to be very candid, don't take this wrong, John, we wanted to give John advice. We didn't want John to redo the design.
Okay.
So
I was just
I
gonna,
think our assignment is for us to make recommendations of what we'd like to see changed.
then I think we need some particulars. I think we need to give him guidance on the width of the sidewalk, the width of the buffer zone, right? The width of the roadway, right?
And what design are we
Make it a 10-foot roadway, make it a 6-foot sidewalk with a 2-foot buffer or something like that. And then maybe that buffer can go in and out depending if we need to accommodate more space through a utility pole or a tree, right? I don't know, I'm just throwing things out there. What are some of the variables that we can work with?
Yeah, I'd love to,
In each
again,
section.
without tasking John to do stuff, and I know things cost money and there's time, but I would love to see a version of that, Gary, but like the maximum that we could do, because we can always go smaller, right? But like, what is the maximum shared path, right, without the impact that we're talking about? But again, like, I think that would be a.
What can be accommodated in the boundary conditions that we talked about of.
Yes, without impacting the residents
people's
and.
walls, right?
And trees.
So, and of what we know of the
So
trees
what-
and of what we know, because
So
otherwise
maybe
it's
what
hard
I'm
to.
hearing is, maybe at our next meeting, we could come back with some recommended edits to see what the reaction is.
Recommended edits of what, though?
What?
Which, the 25% design, or what we as a group think needs
Well, I'm
edit?
saying, it sounds like what I'm hearing, I'm just asking for validation, is maybe we come back with some changed plans to see what the reaction of the group is, to see if we're going in the right direction or not.
I think we should.
I agree. I mean, I think you absolutely
should.
have to.
All right,
think we
that's
can't-
what I'm hearing,
I don't
because
think we
right
can
now,
do-
we
I
don't
don't-
have the tools to design,
But I
right? We're
think-
not designers.
But Jonathan is a key piece of that, because he's got the keys to the kingdom in terms of the dimensions, okay? He knows exactly where the utility poles are, where they have to be moved, and with the help of, the water line 10 years out, or wherever the heck it is, all of that gets integrated in with the discussion with Jonathan. We come back with 2 or 3 recommendations to the group and say, this is what we've come up with, what do you think? But that's going to happen, I think, Mary Ann, outside the open meeting law, is my point. I think it's going to happen around
Well, the
a
staff
closed-door
could-
session. It could be in Jonathan's office, for all I know. And we sit around and just, get on the CAD and away we go.
We can get the staff to get direction and work with John to get something created. And we'll
Do you
We'll
have,
talk to
do you
town
have access
council
to, excuse me, do you have access to Nora's presentation?
No,
How
no.
can you get it? Can you can you convert it to an IGIS file or a JPEG?
That's an
I think it's an
application.
application.
Yeah.
JPEG something or whatever?
No, it's an application that the town licenses, so I can work with you, but I don't think I can transfer the license.
Oh, so it's licensed.
It's an application. It's not a file.
Right,
How much is the
All right.
license?
I don't know. I don't know.
I will get
We
back
have
to
access
everybody
different types of
with
imagery.
a meeting agenda. Please, respond to it if you want to add something, but I think we hear what we need to do for the next step. I'm not sure we know how we're going to do it yet. I want to talk to town council, but we're going to figure out how to get a better place for our next meeting.
Could we
We're
set
running
the,
out of
could we
time. I
set the
do wanna
next
let it-
meeting before we leave here tonight and save time? Like, instead of waiting a week and then another week and another week to set the meeting, could we just determine when the next meeting is possible? Those present?
Yes.
And will this be here or virtual?
Well, we'll have to decide if it's, let's get a date that we can all attend, whether it's
Like-
virtual or
like
not. We may
next
have to be
Wednesday,
virtual because we may not have an option to meet.
I think we should meet like next Wednesday for 2 hours. Like, it's not a problem. I mean, well, I shouldn't say for Jonathan.
I'm on vacation, sorry.
But I'm just
John, we
saying,
need you.
Could you zoom
I
in?
mean, that'll give
Costa
the
Rica.
town time to, set out the meeting notice, make it public, the amount of business days.
So if we look, is Wednesday still the preferred day for people?
Yes,
Yeah.
Saturday the 2nd.
Wednesday or Thursday, either night.
So if we looked at the 6th as our target for our next meeting,
March 6th?
I don't think we'll be ready next week.
Wednesday.
Now, on March 6th, are we gonna give Jonathan some guidance to start, something to so we
We're
can
going to
review
figure
on
out
March
how we
6th?
can legally give him the kind of guidance we need to get what we want for
Fair
the
enough.
next. Okay, but is March 6th where is?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll target March 6th. Let's open up for a few comments, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'll come back. Yes, sir. Yeah, you had your hand up. Would you state your name? Can you speak in the microphone? Would you state your name and your
Yeah,
address?
name's Stu Eldridge, 366 Canton Street. I'm gonna guess there's maybe 90 homes on Canton Street. Do they carry any more weight making, on these options than Joe on the other side of town? And is one of the options gonna be no action at all?
That's always, we may come up with a recommendation that we
I
can't
haven't
get
heard
to a
anything about
recommendation.
the option being no action.
That's what I'm saying.
So, I'd like to, maybe the Canton residents, Canton Street residents, maybe should carry a little weight and maybe they should be polled and, because, that's going to be, affecting them more so than anybody else in town.
I think, thank you for the comment first. We absolutely want the feedback from the residents of the town, but we don't have anything to have feedback yet. We have the feedback that the 25% plan has zero support, and that has been stopped. That plan is not going forward.
There has been some chatter about, probably a lot of the Canton Street residents, if you like input from them, or maybe even, maybe a polling from them to see what their option might be.
When we are, as we go through the process, we do want feedback. We just aren't at a point to have feedback, because right now, what I'm hearing is two feedbacks: stop the project or figure out how to go. I'm not hearing as consistent a message from those who are calling me, just so you know. So, but our mission, just to be clear, is to make recommendations on what could change on the 25% plan, to go forward with a plan to go to the state, back to the state with. And we've expanded that to expanding it to what other recommendations we want to make to the select board. A recommendation could be, after talking to neighbors, after seeing the feedback, we believe there's no plan. That could be a recommendation. So we're working on that broad general sense first, but to be very clear, our mission, what we agreed to do by forming this working group, was analyze the 25% plan and make recommendations how to improve it. So we're going to do that as the core process. It doesn't mean it's our only process.
Thank
Okay?
you.
I just want to be open and honest. Mr. Olenoff.
Yeah, let me get this.
Can you just
Steve
stand-
Olenoff, 52.
Stand higher.
Yeah, yeah, I know. There we go. Steve Olenoff, 52 Glendale Road. So I'm just going to be positive, give 3 positive suggestions today, because a lot of things I could say, I could talk all night. But the first one that no one's mentioned is the putting the wiring underground. We've done it before. We've done it right out here. It's not a cost of this project. It's a cost borne by on the electric bills of everyone else in town. Now's the perfect time to do it. If you don't do it now, it'll never be done. It'll make this design so much easier, because you wouldn't have to worry about the pole here affecting this, the tree, and affecting the trees. And the poles now affect the trees anyway. And then, that's the thing I want to do, of course, is, stone walls, trees, and bicycle accommodations, and pedestrian accommodations. Those are the 4 things that need to be done. So that would really work to put the wiring on the ground. I think you need to discuss that. Another thing that's that's kind of been forgotten. At one point, we had a proposal for a roundabout at Everett Street. And roundabouts work great. They're being put in all over the world. I think that's a perfect place for a roundabout. So we should bring, they designed it, but there wasn't quite enough money for when we were putting in the other traffic calming things. So we should look at that one again. And the next thing on, this is the same thing I advocated for on the design for Gay Street, is put the sidewalk on the other side of the sidewalk of the path, whatever you want to call it, but put it on the other side of the stone wall. So you have the street, you have a stone wall, and then you have the path of the sidewalk. And then the pedestrians feel safe because they have a stone wall between them and the traffic.
Right.
And the quiet and all that. So I think, and the stone walls can be moved. That's a legitimate part of this project, is to move stone walls. And I think, actually, we should add more stone walls. At one point, obviously, there were stone walls maybe the whole length of Canton Street, and one by one, people just removed them until we started the scenic bylaw regulations, and that prevented any more stone walls from being removed. So it'd be nice to get some of those old stone walls back. So those are my positive suggestions.
Just a question on the power. Would that be, is there a grant that would help bury the power lines? Or is that part of this, is that a separate?
So there wouldn't be anything that MassDOT gets involved with. It wouldn't be anything that MassDOT does.
Right.
Because nowadays there are grants for everything. So,
Right.
yeah, you can try to do that. Oh, by the way, putting it underground means we wouldn't lose power all the time. And generally, when you lose power in the neighborhood, it's because a tree limb fell on a line on Canton Street.
Usually it's Everett Street now.
Sometimes Everett, yeah.
Right. But what about?
But the power comes down Canton
But
Street.
then how do you get power, so then all the houses would have to trench to the transformer box on Canton Street?
Yeah, that's all. That'll be done as part of the project. That's part of the
Alright.
expense of doing that, is
Okay.
to go right up to where your meter is.
All right,
Okay.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, if there's no objection, we'll take one more comment and then, yes, sir.
Go ahead, Paul. Paul Schauber.
Can you talk in the mic for the recording?
I'm Paul Schauber. I live at 264 Canton Street. And the only thing I was wondering, a couple of things. First of all, I drive up and down that street for the last 47 years. Has anybody really looked at what this is going to do to some people's homes? Not everybody, but some people. That wasn't a fair representation on that board. It gives you an idea. But if you drive up and down the street and you see the effect it's going to have, not everybody, but a good portion of the people's home, it's not right.
What do you mean by that?
The effect it's going to have on people's homes. Highway you're going to be living on Newbury Street when all is said and done. You got some people's homes that can't be more than 25 feet from the street. And that's going to make a huge impact for not everybody, but a decent portion.
Setback.
Yeah, the setback is what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Okay.
Secondly, could you make it a one-way street? I mean, that
Right,
would have,
we've tried that, just so you know, we've tried that. We even tried to make Canton Street a cul-de-sac a few years ago.
I'm just saying a one-way street, because then the traffic's going to go one way, and you're not going to get it coming back and forth. It's
Yeah,
going to
but
be safer.
there has to be a second street to take it the other way, and there isn't one.
But
That's
there's-
the problem.
When you
Seen
say
the
a
East
second
Street
street,
in
I don't quite get that.
If you have traffic going
One way.
south, there's got to be another street that takes it north. It is a county, just so you know, it is a county way. And because of that, the county is very concerned. They have to approve anything we do. They made it very clear they need to get people from Dedham to Stoughton and back, and they depend on.
Well, you have that road that's down the bottom there where I think you were talking about a rotary, or beyond Everett Street, where UPS is, that road there. That's a big road. It could even be bigger and not affect.
You know what,
homes.
I'm actually not doing the right thing by telling you that, because I'm going to tell you, we'll look into it. I want to get a definitive answer, and that's a better answer, so
Yeah,
we will look
probably.
into it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With that, do we need to take a motion to adjourn? Is that the way it's supposed?
I have one question. I just have one question. before this gentleman speaks, the dialogue that we have with the DOT, is that like one time only, or is there a continual dialogue we can have to work with them? I mean, one feedback.
We're gonna assess what we do in response to DOT once we know what we've got. But it's,
I didn't hear you clearly, I'm sorry.
we're not talking to DOT till
Okay.
we know what we are
All
trying to
right,
accomplish.
because what I'd like to do is at least come to the DOT, but then have a dialogue with them. It's like, look at this
We're gonna have a
situation.
process
Okay.
to whatever we decide to get it.
All right,
Because if we don't have funding, we don't have a project
I
anyway.
understand that.
Hassan Yeager, I represent 45 Forbes Road. The last meeting, the consultant said you've been working on this plan for approximately 5 years. The Finance Committee says they heard of this a year and a half ago. The residents just heard about it for the Downey Street meeting. This has been going on behind the scenes for a long time without public disclosure, without transparency. And there's many levels of this project that are not properly disclosed. I would just say, as a experienced planner and economic developer consultant, I have dealt with many towns that have scenic roads. They're sacred. Their stone walls and post and rail fences are videotaped, they're recorded. If anybody touches them, there's public hearings, there's fines. And I'm astounded how this project has gone. It's not even Westwoods Road. I've talked to Norfolk County, and I don't agree with what was said here about Norfolk County. Norfolk County felt they put this road to bed in 2015. They filed a final layout. They met with the neighbors, and the neighbors wanted a scenic way and traffic calming features, and that's what they built in the road. People thought that was a done deal. Not every street needs to have a bike path and a sidewalk. The chairman of the selectmen there, I don't believe you have a bike path or a sidewalk in front of your home, do you? No.
We're not,
Well, the point is, there isn't anything that mandates, particularly on a scenic way, that you have these features. In fact, the scenic way really lends itself to the opposite. So somehow, you started this committee at 25%, even though 600 folks signed a petition to Downey Street School telling you they didn't want this project, they didn't want this sidewalk. About 4 or 5 people said they were in favor of it, and interestingly, 2 or 3 of them wound up on this committee. I don't think even one, possibly one person in this whole committee actually is a resident of Downey Street who said they were opposed to the project, even though 600 folks showed up. And I'd like to know what happened to the report to the DOT. There were over 100 responses sent to the DOT opposing this, and somehow there's never been a disclosure report about that. What happened to that report? This is being painted like, and you and your dialogue say that you get 50-50. Well, I don't know. Your sample doesn't mean much to me because they've got certified 600 signatures here. I'd like to see your signatures. I don't think that the proportionality you're representing is correct. And I think a serious alternative has to be no action on this project. And I would just tell you, contrary to what people are being led down the path, the DOT is not going to spend $20 million to do some little meandering partial sidewalk on Canton Street. That's not what this is about. And if people don't understand, I appreciate the selectmen have been in office 2 or 3 years. This thing has a genesis back to 2010, to a previous 40B, to other development designs, and it's come right forward to the MBTA thing and what's going on in Milton right now. And this is all involving Canton Street and Westwood Station. This is not about a sidewalk, and that's going to come out. And if this continues, and if there's lawsuits, there's going to be depositions, we're going to look at emails, we're going to find out who talked to who, what developers, what former officials were involved in this, right back to day one. We're going right back 15 years. So it isn't as simple as just we're going forward, we're going to design a daisy chain of a partial sidewalk. I'm just saying that, and the residents are going to meet, and they're going to be legally represented. I caution you to that. Thank you.
With that, I'll take a motion to, well.
Can I make one comment, Steve?
Sure.
Please. I, being a resident of Canton Street, I would not want a path in my front yard, and I would not want a path in anybody's here front yard. So if I don't want it, why would I want them to have something done to their lawn? So just, where I'm coming from, and I think people do know that I've been opposed to this from the beginning. I am willing to look at things, however, I don't think anything that's being said will actually change my mind, because I don't want to have somebody else's property damaged if I'm not willing to have the same thing done to me.
Even if it's not your property though, Maureen?
If it's
A
not
lot of
my
it's in the,
property.
but a lot of it's in the right of way, which we've been
Correct,
talking about.
but if somebody had to go behind her stone wall,
Totally hear the behind the stone wall. I like the idea, it sounds pretty, but
That would make
at
it
the same
10 feet
time,
from my
it's
front
on
door.
your,
So-
on people's property, but I
I just
totally
don't want to
hear
have
you.
something done to my property
Totally
that
hear
I
you.
wouldn't want done
Totally
to
hear you.
somebody else.
Totally hear
Town
you.
doesn't take care of the right of way, the residents do.
Understood, but it's still town-owned
And that's
property.
not gonna change in the future.
But it's
okay?
town-owned property.
That's not the point.
It is.
The
So-
residents take care of it.
Excuse me, this is not
I know,
a
I just wanted to
debate.
make a
So,
comment.
but there's been a lot said. I hope we can end on a positive note.
Yes,
So first, let me say to everyone, I think everyone on this working group is trying to do the right thing. We have not, no one that I'm aware of has come to any conclusion. Before you get to a yes or a no, you've got to look at what options you have. We have to, I have the benefit of doing planning for many years. You don't start with your answer, you start with no answer and see where it takes you. And that's what I'm trying to do. I got involved with this for the record because I was against what was being done.
And I called you,
But, pardon?
and I called you.
That's right. Gary may have been the first one to say, how come you're not involved? How come you're quiet on this? But, and I'm not going to go back and forth with people. That's not what the process is for yet. When we get to a place that it's clear what this working group is deciding, then we'll get into that. But we can't have a debate until we know what we're debating. And the last thing I just want to remind people, and I'm going to try to be doing better at it, first of all, I only want to look forward. I don't want to look back. I can't debate what happened. I wasn't involved before. I don't have the information. This isn't about what was done yesterday. This is about what we're doing tomorrow. And our goal is to get something to recommend that we can get widespread support, or we may be recommending nothing. So just give us the chance to see where we're going. I'm asking for your cooperation to give us a chance.
I just want to state that, I was open to the project when in terms of a sidewalk on Canton Street, yeah, let's consider it. But when I saw the massive plans and the scale, and I was at that meeting with Jonathan, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is massive, and I was against it. And we pushed to stop that design because it wasn't harmonious with the neighborhood. It wasn't what the residents wanted. I got Steve involved. I've worked with Steve before in University Ave, sound mind, and he worked with Mary Ann, and we came up with the ability to have us contribute to a design as to what would be acceptable. So I'm willing to look at a design, what can fit, what would be a minimal impact, and then bring it to the residents to consider.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
if it works, great. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But we have to, I think we owe it to ourselves to at least look at what may be possible. And we should have the ability to approve it or not approve it, from the residents' perspective. That's my personal.
I appreciate
and I
that.
appreciate your effort in stepping up in this role. It's a difficult role to be in, and I'm grateful that you're in it.
Well, I appreciate that vote of confidence,
Yeah.
thank you. And I really do respect every comment, I do. And I'm not trying to stifle conversation, I'm just trying to keep us focused on looking to where we're going instead of where we've been. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Does anyone object? All in favor? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.